Hey everybody, a few weeks ago I put out a video about religious trauma and it really resonated with a lot of you and I got a ton of wonderful comments. And so today I'm going to comment on your comments because I think there's a lot more that we can still talk about. And as always, I'm happy to do more videos about the topic. I can definitely do one on how we heal, but let's just jump right into it. And the first comment is, it makes me feel ashamed to admit, but being brought up religious left deep psychological wounds based around shame and notions of not being good enough or defective. There were so many comments about shame and what I would call inappropriate guilt, meaning misplaced guilt. And I did a video on my channel recently about shame. If you don't know what shame is, we can be ashamed of something we've done, right? Meaning we can be upset and hate that we did it. Oh, like I don't like what that says about me. I don't want people to think that about me. However, if those thoughts and that thought process becomes chronic, meaning more days than not we feel that way about ourselves, it can turn into shame or toxic shame, meaning I think something inside me is broken. I must be wrong in some way because this keeps happening to me, or I keep thinking this way. And this can play into religion a lot because a lot of religious conversations can be around like, oh, if you're doing that, then you're letting the devil creep in, or that's a sin, or that's wrong, right? There's a lot of this like black and white, right and wrong talk in church. And that unfortunately can lead to a lot of shame and misplaced guilt. And I also wonder if this shame narrative is coming out of our own identity. And if we don't, maybe let's say we're part of the LGBTQ plus community and our church doesn't support that, I wonder if that's causing shame. Or if there are things that we've done in our past, maybe prior to coming to church, or things that they say are unforgivable. I know there's been terms like that thrown around in the church I grew up in. I don't know if that is, rings true for any of you, but that kind of feeling can just make it impossible for us to not feel like something's wrong with us, right? Or if I think differently or have questions about my religion, then, something must be wrong with me too. Because I definitely heard that a lot when I had questions about like, well, what if people in other parts of the world never heard about Jesus? Then are they sinners and they're not going to go to heaven as well? And they were like, why do you have to ask questions like that? Those aren't questions that we're going to talk about. Like I was made to be like ashamed or embarrassed for the fact that I was even questioning things like that. And so I can see how religion, certain narratives within religious culture can lead to shame. And I don't know if that's something you've experienced, but I saw a lot of this in the comments. The next chunk of comments I want to talk about are in relation to that one phrase that I hated, which is like, God never gives you more than you can handle. And someone says, I heard the God only gives you what he knows you can handle thing a lot growing up, and through early adulthood. It still bugs the crap out of me to hear that. And I was just so interested in the fact that so many of you had the same feelings and thoughts that I did about that. And I think a lot of people, at least in my church, said it as a way to be like, it's going to be okay, don't worry. It was like their way of saying, you'll get through this. But instead of saying, you'll get through this, they're like, God never gives you more than you can handle. And I felt that to be so invalidating or minimizing and kind of just a push off. And that is just another reason that some of that toxic, some toxic religious communities can harm us and cause us to be traumatized. And also I just want to add in there, if any of you are some of the people who maybe have used this phrase before to show support and love, how about instead we say something like, I'm so sorry, or that sounds like it's really hard, or I'm here to listen, help me understand what you're going through. I'm so sorry that happened. Any of those phrases are so much more validating, supportive, and encouraging, not to mention empowering, rather than God never gives you more than you can handle, because that just, like I said, just feels like a brush off. Now, the third comment I want to comment on says, wow, straight onto my favorite video list. Oh, I'm so glad it was helpful. I have a lot of religious trauma stemming from my childhood and teenage years, but I really like having faith. And I found that being spiritual is so helpful in moments of grief, and has helped me not live in fear, knowing that there's something bigger than me. I can understand that. But it's so hard to identify how to join a healthy, faithful establishment without making myself vulnerable to weaponization. This video was so good at listing out the major things we need to look out for. Thank you so much, Katie. Now, what really struck me with this is the difference between having beliefs and how important that can be for a lot of us. All of us have beliefs, whether they're religious based or not. And having beliefs is kind of the foundation from which we create our sense of self and who we are, right? So there's a difference between having those beliefs and weaponizing beliefs, meaning we're using religion as a way to harm, and the beliefs that they have, like, let's say you're in one of those churches that isn't a fan of the LGBTQ plus community, they could say, being attracted as a female to another female or being gay is against the Lord's wishes. And so we're using this belief as a weapon to hurt someone, or like not saving yourself till marriage, is a sin in God's eyes and it makes you a bad person or whatever. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, is that it's okay to have beliefs. We all have them. It's okay to be spiritual. But when we use beliefs as a weapon to harm someone else, that's when it becomes toxic and that's when it becomes traumatizing. And I've kind of touched on this throughout the others, but the fourth comment I want to talk about or comment on says, I told my minister about my gay thoughts when I was 13. He told me he could help me. We had many conversations in which he told me that my thoughts and feelings were bad. I'm so sorry. That this was the devil talking to me. He told me my feelings were not real, and if I acted on them, I would go to hell. I'm in a relationship now, but the shame is still in me. There were a lot of comments about sexuality and sexual identity. And I've heard in churches all the time, they'll say, love the sinner, hate the sin. Even that phrasing just, I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. But when this quote unquote sin is our sexual identity, is our sexuality, is who we are, that can lead to a lot of shame because we can believe something is inherently wrong with us, right? Who I am and what I desire in my life, who I love, who I'm attracted to is wrong. Then I must be wrong. Something must be wrong with me. And that just proves how careful we have to be with language when it comes to religion and spirituality and the way we talk about our beliefs and sins and right and wrong. Again, that black and white, it's never going to lead us to anywhere healthy or happy. And I'm so sorry to anybody out there who's had one of these traumatizing events or traumatizing conversations at the hands of someone who was supposed to be a spiritual leader or a religious guide to help us feel good about who we are and strong in our identity. Because again, using those beliefs as weapons is traumatizing. And I also don't want to leave out the fact that there are a lot of religious spaces, I know a ton of them in Los Angeles, that are open to the LGBTQ plus community and aren't so focused on this, what I would call like a traditional way of living, meaning it's only heterosexual, people get married, these things you have to do, like that's the only right way. There are other religious spaces that are more open and accepting of all walks of life, of all choices, of all sexualities. And sometimes it's just finding that right space. If you still want church to be part of your life and religion is really important to you, I encourage you to seek that out. The next comment I want to comment on says, sending love and healing to everyone. I am still healing from the modest is hottest purity culture. Oh my God, I remember that phrase. It takes me back. Now, if you don't know what the purity culture is, I could probably do an entire video about it. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. But in the 90s, which is like most of my childhood and adolescence, purity culture was rampant in every church, to be honest. And all of this purity around like modest is hottest. I remember like not being able to wear shorter skirts. It had to be at least to my knees and like where my hands hit. And I just had this, oh my God, okay. My youth group leader or youth pastor, his wife would wear like V-neck shirts, because back in the day these V-necks were very on trend, but because modest is hottest, she would wear these like tank top things that would come up to here, and she was always pulling it up, and she would say, we can't give men temptation, we can't do that, that's a sin. And it was just a very bizarre conversation that it's like my responsibility as a female to not tempt a man because he's not responsible or accountable for his actions. I don't know. That's some like crazy mindfuckery, if you ask me. So anyways, I remember all about purity culture and just how toxic that can be. And it's frustrating as a woman how, looking back, it only applied to the women. And I remember having to change all sorts of outfits and do all this stuff just to be very modest. And I even remember as I grew up, I'm not this way anymore, but like changing in a locker room at school was like overwhelming to me because it's supposed to be super modest and not let anybody see you. And I don't know, it was almost like the naked body is dirty or a sin, or I don't know what kind of messages I somehow like received and accepted and like rooted in myself, but it definitely messed with me for many, many years. The next comment I want to comment on says, thank you for bringing religious trauma to light. Of course, of course. Coming out was truly the hardest thing I've ever done because of my connection with the church over 10 years ago. I find myself missing that connection, but the damage was certainly done. I was so moved by how many of you felt that loss and wanting that community and that connection, but knowing that the religious aspect of it or that particular religious gathering place was too toxic, too traumatizing for you, and you had to leave. And I think it's important for us to just acknowledge how much grief we might feel and allowing ourselves to grieve that loss. It was a loss. We had this dream of what it was or this belief about what it was going to be, and it wasn't. And that grief can be palpable, can be heavy, and it's okay to cry about it. It's okay to be angry about it. It's okay to bargain with it. Grief is grief, and I'd encourage each and every one of you, if you're feeling this way, allow yourself some time and space to grieve. And just know that it is okay to go seeking community somewhere else. Healthy communities do exist, and we can have healthy discourse and connection even if our beliefs differ. We don't have to agree 100% with anyone. And I also want you to know that when you're seeking out a community that's healthy and non-toxic or non-traumatizing, just make sure that there is support for each and every one of you to grow, to ask questions, to change, to challenge our old ways of thinking. All of those are good things to look out for and good, ways to know you're on the right path and you're in the right community. Anything that tells you can't change, can't question, like when I got in trouble for asking, what about people who never heard of God? Would they go to hell? That's not a healthy community. You shouldn't be shamed for asking questions. That should be something that's supported and something that's encouraged. The next comment I want to comment on says, this is so hard, especially when you're in a relationship with someone who still believes and has a wildly different experience with the religion than you did. My husband and I were raised in the same religion and married in that religion. And in the last few years, I've started acknowledging my religious trauma and pulling away. But his experiences within the same church were so different from mine. And what I experienced as traumatic has been uplifting for him. That's been incredibly hard to navigate in our relationship as we both try to respect the other's experiences. This comment really struck me, and what I really want to talk about here is the importance of listening from each other. And just because we went to the same church or had the same pastor or went on that same trip, knowing that we can have different experiences. And I know, as like I said, a lot of the things that I found upsetting and traumatizing or shame-filled really were directed at women. And so if Sean had been at the same church with me, he might have had a different experience. He might have, because when I would go on retreats and stuff, I'm sure most of you felt this way too, or had the same experience. The women were separated from the men, because we don't want any temptation. Don't want to let the devil in there, right? And so we were always separated. And we had a lot of nighttime Bible studies, women separate from men. And it was in those conversations that I found most of the toxic and harmful behavior to take place. And so leaving space for conversations and understanding, I think, is going to be key. Obviously, it's key in any relationship, and this is your husband, so you're married. And I think hopefully you two can communicate about this. He can be understanding. He can understand that what might have been helpful for him was harmful to you. And I think really what I would encourage you to do is just have more of those conversations. Remember, whenever we're having difficult conversations, we don't have to get it all out at once. I would encourage you just to focus on one point or 3 little points and then ask him for what you need from him, which at this point might just be, I just really would like you to listen and hear me out because I'm really struggling. And I think putting it out there in that way and allowing for these conversations to be had can hopefully bring you and your husband closer and help him understand that while his experience might be one way, yours can be the other, and they both can exist and they can both be true and real. The next comment I want to comment on is kind of like indoctrination versus belief. And it says, I used to be a Christian, but I lost faith in my friends and family, but I'm still being forced to go to church even though I'm an atheist. Now, if you're looking for a religious space that's healthy, there shouldn't be any forcing involved. I know a lot of us, I'm sure myself included, grew up in a household where you had to go to church. I remember being woken up and it wasn't like you could say no. As I got older, my brother didn't want to go anymore, so he would say no and he was allowed to stay, but I still had to go. And part of me did it to please my mom, but it's weird how you can feel forced. And in any healthy religious space, just know that it should come from within first. Your want, your desire to go to church and to develop your spirituality or belief system starts from within and works outward, not the other way around. Anything that feels like you're forced and you have to, in that black and white, again, that all or nothing, you're in or you're out, you're a sinner or you're not, you're pure. That's where it's unhealthy. Any healthy religious space is going to give you the time and space needed for you to figure out what you believe. And we all are going to need some time to kind of sort through that. It shouldn't feel forced upon us without any choice. That's what's traumatizing. And another comment I got says, does this correlate with a cult? Now, there were a ton of comments and questions about cults, and I'm really just putting this one out here to say, if you want me to do an entire video about what cults are, I have some books about them. I have some articles I pulled. I felt like I couldn't do it justice just in a commenting on comments. So you let me know in those comments if you'd like to see that. But let's move on to our final question. Or final comment rather. It says, too many therapists are unsupportive of or even downright hostile to non-religious or non-believer clients. It's demonizing to pay a therapist and open up to them, only to have them effectively tell you that the reason you're broken is because you need to develop a spiritual side. How do these people have their license? So it's nice to see a therapist who actually acknowledges that religion can be harmful. Oh my God, I cringed when I read this, and I'm so sorry. Just like any job, unfortunately, therapists are people and they can suck at their jobs and be bad at them. And that is wrong, and that's traumatizing, and you should file a complaint. We're licensed through our state boards, and people can file complaints against us if we've done something that's not okay, and I believe that's very not okay. But just know, anybody out there who's seeking a therapist or wondering if their therapist is doing a good job, I have a video about how to know if you're seeing a good therapist and a bad therapist, so you can search for those and look into that. And that will hopefully help a little bit. But just know that a therapist works for you. And our job as therapists is to learn about your experience from you, not to judge, not to make assumptions, not to tell you that you're broken because you're not religious. I'm supposed to learn from you what's going on and what you're wanting to work towards, set some goals with you, and help you work back from those, or towards those really. But you know how you set your final goal and then work backwards? That's my job. And that's what I love doing. And I love encouraging people to grow and to change and to become better versions of themselves. And none of that includes judgment and saying that because you're not religious, that's where your problems are coming from. Like, oh, that's just the devil. Did they not go to school? I don't want to talk about, it's too much. You know how I stand on this. I think that's really inappropriate. You could file a complaint if you felt so inclined, but just know that that's not all therapists. And you can also find therapists, you can ask right away. I think it's fair to ask a therapist, if they are religious, if they're okay if someone's not religious. You can ask that stuff straight up, because we need to find someone who will help us heal from the religious trauma. We don't need to layer it on more and more. Again, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Finding a good therapist is really important, especially when we're doing this kind of work. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's just something different, right? We had so many great comments, so many great questions. If you have other comments and questions, I'm happy to do more of these. Keep them coming. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.